Welcome everyone to AbbeyCast. Today we have a special post-election day episode. And I guess an appropriate episode to do post-election day, especially the election that we don't want to say just had, that we're still having, is still unfolding as we speak here. So I'm sure plenty of people are just a little bit anxious maybe, and just thinking about what's going to happen, what's going on in the future in my life, in this country, in the world. So we're here today to kind of settle ourselves, be grounded a bit, and talk about a very important ministry that is probably closer to you at home listening or watching than you know, probably present within your parish most likely, but it's something that we'll get into today. So I'd like to welcome our two guests for today, who are Rita Nero and Hans Hermans, and they are both involved in Stephen ministry in two different ways. Hans is a Stephen minister and Rita was a care receiver. So we're going to be talking about the Stephen ministry from these different perspectives and what it is and why it's very relevant to us and how it can be helpful to people. So maybe we'll start with the dual perspectives, but whoever wants to answer first can. What is Stephen ministry?
Okay, I guess I'll answer that. Stephen, as you know, Saint Stephen, was the first martyr, and he's kind of our patron, not because he was martyred, even though that's not what we're trying to do, just in case you think we're trying to become martyrs. We're not. The thing that is probably lesser known about him is that he was also one of the first deacons in the church. And the role of the deacons in the early church was really to take care of the community, to watch over the people, to help them where they need it, especially in all kinds of ways. So that's why Stephen is our patron, if you will, and why we are named after him, or at least the organization is. I brought a little poop sheet with me because I can't remember all the facts.
That's okay.
So don't mind me if I have that.
I don't know.
But the Stephen ministry was started as a ministry back in 1945 by a clinical psychiatrist who was also a pastor, a Lutheran pastor in St. Louis. And his wife got very sick and eventually died, and he had to take care of her. And the thing that he noted especially was that it was extremely important for somebody to be with the other person who was hurting. And his motto became, nobody should suffer alone. And that is kind of the motto of Stephen ministry. We are people who volunteer to sit with, talk with, listen to especially, people who are hurting in one way, shape, or form, and I think we'll come into that kind of hurts we are dealing with. So in 45 he started that, and at the moment there are about 13,000 congregations that work with Stephen ministry. And it's sad to say the Catholic Church is probably one of the lesser users of Stephen ministry.
Okay.
So that's one of the facts.
Now, Hans, can I stop you there? Can I ask you,
sure.
Do you know why that is? Is it because it maybe started within a Protestant?
I don't know. It started as a Lutheran organization.
Right, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And, classically, at least historically, the Catholic churches in the past always said, hey, wait a moment, we are different. And happily that's changed a lot. But I think that's probably a bit of the outcome of the whole thing, because they didn't want to talk to, as a matter of fact, when I was a child, we were barely allowed to talk to Protestants. Things were, I know my wife was not allowed to date a Protestant, very good friend. So that history is carried forward, and that's my suspicion why it didn't take.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So at the moment there is 13,000 congregations of about 180 different denominations. Of course, they're all Christian, are mostly Christian. It's not restricted to Christians, mind you, but we are going from the motto that we listen, we are there with the person, but Christ is doing the healing. We don't do the healing.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, there are about 75,000 trained Stephen leaders. Okay, the Stephen leaders are the ones who are in charge of the local organization.
Okay.
And they organize things. They have extra training. There is about upwards of 600,000 Stephen ministers at the moment, worldwide, which is a tremendous number. I don't know how many million people have been care receivers, people who have been helped this way, but there's millions of them.
Right.
So that's a bit of the history of Stephen ministry in general. Here in Daylesford, unless we want to come to that later.
No, go with it, please.
I don't want to do all the talking, but it started back in 2001.
Okay.
And Father Antonucci at the time met a Stephen minister who actually at the moment is still one of our Stephen ministers. Okay, she is probably the longest that has been with the group. And he became interested in it. So he and Father Terrico, the two of them, got a little bit of money and attended a Stephen leader training session, which is a 50-hour, 1 week long dedicated course to what it's all about. And then so they talked about it. Eventually, back by the time it got to be about 2003, I believe, that they actually started here at Daylesford. Initially, they had when they first advertised, they had about 75 possible interested people. And actually, it worked out to be 14 people who became Stephen ministers. And from there on, I mean, it was a slow start. But there on, it has been there ever since here. Currently, we have about 20 active Stephen ministers in our group. We just recently had 6 new ones trained.
Nice.
And 5 leaders. So 5 of us kind of try to answer problems, guide people as you go. But what we do is we minister to people who hurt. That's what it is all about. The motto of Stephen ministry, in general, we have kind of a compass, and that's a 4-way star, and there's 4 directions, north and south. Don't ask me what is north and which one is south, but one is, of course, is spirituality. It's in the way of purpose. Another one, the second one, if you will, is compassion. We listen to people. That's one of our key training aspects, is listening to what people want to say or have to say. Or sometimes they say nothing. You just be with the person. And thirdly, with a skill, the third aspect, each Stephen minister has a 50-hour training, which is does not mean that they are professional. They're not. But they're trained to listen, trained to also be reliable. And by that I mean primarily that all conversation is confidential. What is said between the Stephen minister and the care receiver stays between the two of them. Okay, so those are the 4 areas that we deal with. And so let's take it from there.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's a great point to transition over to Rita, who is a care receiver. Can I ask, and Hans, I want to acknowledge the great number of unknown care receivers, right, that have been ministered to by the Stephen ministers. So that's a demographic that Rita is going to speak on behalf of today, in broad strokes, I guess, but from your own personal experience. So, Rita, can I ask you what led you to seek out Stephen ministry? Is it something that you knew existed? Did someone tell you about it? Did you maybe hear about it at your parish? I'll let you kind of just to go with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. First, I want to thank the Daylesford Abbey for inviting me, Stephen Minister Hans, his lovely wife Anne, to speak. And I have been coming to the Daylesford Abbey since 1991, sporadically. And then when I was able to come more often to Sunday Mass, I would read it. I would see it advertised in the little weekly bulletin.
So it was right here at the Abbey?
Right here at the Abbey.
Okay.
And little did I know that with different friends and some of the different challenges, all ages, I would say, I heard about this Stephen ministry. I think it just might be of help. And a dear friend, my best friend, did utilize it, and then she spread the word. But I know for a fact that she received much help from her Stephen minister. Then little did I know that many years later, I was going to be in need, because I was in pain after the loss of my oldest brother, Nick. And I knew that the Holy Spirit was guiding me to get a little extra help. And so I called, and they called me back on the phone, and then they invited me to have a meeting with two other people. And they listened to me, and I spoke from my heart in between tears. And then they assigned me someone, and I was blessed with the person that I was given. The loss of my oldest brother, Nick, because he was 13 years older than me, he was my brother, he was my friend, he was a spiritual mentor, and he generally loved me. And of course, my other brother, too. When that loss happened, there was a tremendous void. And even though it was 2 years after his death, I still was in quite a bit of pain. I had gone to a bereavement group at my local parish, St. Simon and Jude, but I knew, like a year later, I only went once there, but I knew I needed something a little bit more of a closer one-on-one. And I was given that. Do you want me to continue with what I want to say?
By all means, yeah, sure.
The person that I was given, when I told my spiritual director, who I have come here for 20 years for spiritual direction once a month, when I told her who the person was, she said, Rita, you have a very wise woman. I was like, wow.
Yeah, now, Rita, let me stop you for a moment. Well, first of all, let me thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And the impact that Stephen Ministry has had on you. But a couple things that I observed when you were sharing is, first of all, acknowledging grief, loss, pain, these very difficult concepts to talk about, right? And to take it back to what Hans said in terms of how the ministry itself started with this pastor grieving the loss of his wife, it's something that we shouldn't have to go through alone, suffering. And immediately the Beatitude comes to mind, and blessed are those who mourn, right? It's a natural emotion, series of processes of emotions and, feelings and thoughts that we have to work through. And I just thought it was so important that you add in these details of it was 2 years after your brother's passing that you sought this out. You had already been to a bereavement group, right? Here you are, and you're also in spiritual direction. You are a person that is on top of this, and you're engaged in, navigating through this, but you still find yourself hitting that point of saying, like, I'm not enough to make this happen on my own, right? And that there is help out there from something much more than myself that is present within these Stephen ministers. So, I think those are important components of your story to highlight, because grief is an emotion that, before the podcast started, we were talking about this. We were talking about a bigger 30,000 foot perspective, we could say, of culture and our avoidance of suffering collectively, right? And it's a human emotion that we all experience, yet it is very difficult to face and confront at times, and its authenticity and its rawness and how personal it is to us, right? So the fact that you're already trying to navigate through this and need to ask for help, I think, is a great wake-up call to everyone to say that, hey, we are not enough, and there is something greater. There is someone greater that can help us through that. So that's all I wanted to point out. But if you wanted to continue to share, by all means, please.
Well, I had the thought that, we're all different personalities. And I am a private person and reserved, and I just knew that I needed to look outward, not in family. And so I just knew the Holy Spirit was guiding me to pick up the phone for me and to say, I need help. And one of the gifts is, I like what Hans said, that they're there to listen. And I just knew that I was being heard. Each time I came, and the duration was 8 months. I knew by the 8th month, and I had told my director, I'm well. I'm so much better. I'm going to come back one more month, but then I'm done because I've gotten so much healing. I knew instinctively, I knew intuitively that I had been given much help. So, but for the person to listen to me was a great, great gift to me.
Yeah. I think that touches on an important point too, that I've heard a lot of spiritual teachers comment on, I've heard a lot of medical doctors comment on, is that the body knows how to heal itself. Like, we get a cut on our finger and it will eventually scab and then heal itself, right? And our soul knows how to heal too, but if we are too within ourselves maybe and can't seek that outside perspective, like you said, even beyond your family, our family and closest friends might be those people that we go to immediately when we need to vent or express some sort of difficult emotion, but they might not always be the best, because there is definitely a bias there and conflicts of interest, right? So here you are seeking out an even, more third party, we could say, perspective to allow you some sort of look back in on you objectively, maybe. So I think that's really important. But Hans, I'm sorry, I can hear you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, in that area, it was Saint Teresa, I think, one of the doctors of the church, who said at one time, look, we are the hands and feet of God, of Christ himself. You can't see him, but you are the representative. He works through you. And that's what Stephen ministers really try to be. They try to be the representative of Christ who is doing the healing. We don't expect to heal anybody. We're not professionals in that respect. In fact, it might be interesting to point out that initially, when a person asks for Stephen ministry, and he or she is interviewed by two of the leaders usually, and in that period we try to, or in that conversation, interview, we try to evaluate if this is something we can deal with, or if we feel it needs a professional. And if it needs a professional, in our opinion, we will tell the care receiver, look, this is not something that we are trained to deal with. We recommend and we can help you find, if necessary, somebody who can help you. And that may occur right then, or sometimes it's happened that it occurs after or during the Stephen ministry relationship.
Right.
So we'll stand back. And the other aspect is that way back, it was felt by Ken Haught, the founder of Stephen Ministry.
I'm sorry,
And
what was the person's name?
Ken Haught.
Ken Haught.
H-A-U-G-H.
Okay.
He's still around, he's retired.
Okay.
And he lives in St. Louis, I believe. But he was a pastor, and he felt that it was important that pastors get overloaded, especially in parishes. They can't deal with all the people that come to them because they have an issue of some sort.
Right.
So he felt that, hey, there was a role for lay people, volunteers, to help and minimize, or at least help him to take care of some of these issues that he didn't have to deal with all the time. And so there is, most care receivers come to us through the parish.
Okay.
Sometimes through the pastors, but also through people that they know. Like Rita just said, she met and heard about Stephen Ministry, not from her pastor necessarily, but from one of the other people.
And I guess you can have a real boots on the ground, so to speak, type of pastor,
Absolutely.
but the amount of ground they can cover compared to an entire congregation of people is, not even comparable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a interesting thing, because I'm thinking here, while it's also equipping Stephen ministers with a great ministerial skill, it's also a great life skill just to be able to be an active listener. Because there is a great difference that maybe you'd want to touch on between just listening and hearing, right?
That brings up an interesting point, though, because people don't necessarily realize that, but the Stephen ministers meet every 2 weeks as a group. Mm-hmm. And in essence, I call it ministering to each other. So that when they deal with difficult situation or something like that, the other Stephen ministers, sometimes the more experienced ones, but not always, they will kind of say, well, why don't you do this? Or I think you do that, or something like to that effect. Or we have had situations where we have said, look, this is getting too personal a situation, as opposed to, there is something wrong with that relationship between the two of you. That person needs professional help, or something like that. So there is that to help the Stephen minister, and that's very important to the entire structure of the organization.
Sure, and I think especially important for the care receivers to know too that their ministers have support, they have backup, they have training, they have a community behind them that is going to be there for them essentially as well. Because I'm sure that even the prayer within that group is very important and a driving force to your efficacy, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just being open to the Spirit to let Christ become present through us is.
It's you meet all kinds of situations. I mean, you encounter all kinds of issues. Rita, she was deeply spiritual to begin with, but we've had good, believing Christians, Catholics, and they're angry at God. They're hurting, deeply hurting, and they say, what the heck, God is abandoning me, so to speak. We've had that. And sometimes just praying with somebody, just listening to somebody, that's all that it takes.
Right.
And Christ will do the rest. We don't do it.
So Hans, what led you to become a Stephen minister?
Well,
Exciting.
Rita was ready for this one.
Yeah, I'm ready to hear.
Well,
Yes.
you see, I was asked that question. That's one of the first questions they ask you when you get into Stephen Ministry, and you get the first training class. What led you to Stephen Ministry? And my answer was, well, I've lived on Stephen's Drive for 48 years, so I guess it's about time. But in all seriousness,
The signs have been there all along.
that would kind of lighten the load a little bit. But
Good.
I became interested in it mostly through my wife. Anne has been a caregiver throughout her life in one way, shape, or form. And so when we became associates here, which is a different group of people, we were looking at various ministries, and we heard about Stephen Ministry, but never heard about it before. And Anne said, wait a moment, this is what I've been doing all my life. And so Anne and I tried to do everything together. We've done that ever since we got married 50-some years ago. So that's basically what I said, hey, if she is getting into this, then I want to be with her. And that's how I got into it. It's not that I was looking for that specifically initially, but it's, you know, somebody, like last week's sermon, you have the saint and you have the saint maker. So,
Sure.
You know, I'm not the saint, that's for sure. But, you know, hey, I want some of that.
Right. Well, I think Abbot Dominic did say we're probably a little bit of both, right? Yeah. But that's very interesting how you know, you and your wife chose to do it together. A beautiful thing too.
Yeah, so we're still doing everything together, happily,
right.
hopefully.
Happily and hopefully.
Awesome.
Those are important. Those are important. So, Rita, who would you recommend Stephen Ministry to? You know, what kind of person? I know that sounds very general. What kind of person? Someone in what sort of situation? You know, or in what kind of space in life would you say would be, you know, an ideal person to receive this ministry?
That's a difficult question.
Okay.
Anyway.
Can you think of a better one?
Well, no, I like the question.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's someone, well, definitely someone that is losing hope, like a lot of hope. And so, from my voice, or Hans' voice, or whoever is involved with Stephen Ministry and knows of it, please, make a call. Think about it. Just try it. So yeah, but you know what, all different, I don't know, I mean, of course, someone that has lost someone.
Okay.
Someone that may have gone through a separation, you know. Someone that is in the middle of a divorce.
Okay.
Someone that, oh my goodness, has a very, very sick child. Someone in confusion about their life and where they're going. I would say for sure someone that's in depression, because there's so much hope in hearing. Well, first of all, there's so much hope in sitting across from someone that is there to listen and to have a caring heart. So that makes a world of difference.
Thank you for naming those specifics. I realized when the question was coming out of my mouth, like how vague it was, and you're like, oh, that's a difficult question, but I think you answered it wonderfully in terms of, I know it was a poor question saying what kinds of people, maybe, you know, what sorts of situations do we find ourselves in, right? And you've named quite a few there that are very common, yet it's very easy in these situations to be like, oh, well, that's my cross to bear, right? That's my burden. That's my issue. I'm going to have to work through this.
I'll give you one example that is actually a real example that came up not too long ago. We had a woman who had lost her husband, and obviously she was hurting. And it doesn't just go away. And when she came into Stephen Ministry, one of the first things she told the Stephen Ministry was, look, people, my friends, they're with me, but they're getting tired of me talking about it. A Stephen Minister will listen to Ludifice forever to the same thing. That's basically what the answer was of that Stephen Minister. I'm here to listen to you. I don't care how many times you have to say this. It's that kind of hurt that a Stephen minister can help with.
Right.
The other case I named was somebody who was totally angry at God. That's not that Stephen Minister made that better, but through her conversations, through the meeting, eventually, she got to see things a little bit different. She felt relieved. Emotional problems, like Rita named, they are a fine line, because there we have to really judge, is this a professional's issue, or is Stephen ministry, or if it's appropriate for Stephen ministry.
Right.
So that's a difficult situation, obviously, and we have had situations where the person has a professional
Right.
who is in agreement with Stephen ministry at the same time.
Okay.
Yes.
If the professional who is helping that person says, no, I don't want that relationship, we step back.
Okay.
And it's also for adults. We don't deal with children.
That's a great point to make, are those distinctions there, because some of those areas that people might find themselves in that you name, Rita, are definitely areas that we have specialist professionals to help people navigate through. But like you were saying, in terms of just that same sounding board we may always be unloading these things to, it must be so therapeutic to just hear the words come from someone's mouth, like Rita said, another person, I'm here to listen to you. Not I'm here to help you with your divorce or the loss of your spouse or whatever it is, but I'm here to listen to you.
That's right.
Right.
And Stephen ministry is not a permanent thing. I mean, there is a definite point at which the Stephen minister closes the relationship. The average, they say, is about 2 years, but I've seen longer, I've seen shorter. So it is a definite temporary relationship on a specific issue, even though there might be other issues that come up as they meet. It's also a one-on-one only. That's to say, it's very private. I mean, if somebody's husband is having Stephen as a care receiver, the wife is asked not to be present,
Right.
or the other way around.
Right.
And it's always the same genders, same sexes. I mean, I would minister to a man, my wife would minister to a woman. It's a sad fact, but it shows that men don't really need Stephen ministry most of the time. We have a hard time. Men don't think they know it. And it's so untrue, really. When I've listened to some men, and I can't tell you how they feel and they eventually let go, so to speak. And it's very helpful both for men and women. Women are easier in talking to, communicating, than men are. But it's equally useful for both sexes, we find.
Hans, that's important. Thanks for going there, man. I appreciate it, because that's something when I had met with the Stephen ministers earlier and we were talking about doing this podcast, was a conversation that came up, and I had said, well, Hans, if you can be on the podcast, or another man to, speak truth to power here and, speak about what it is to be a man and, to face grief and struggle and suffering, and then this reality of Stephen ministry and maybe how these two worlds can integrate and coexist, I think is a very important thing for us to hear. Yeah.
And that healing that gentleman receives from the Stephen minister that he goes to, well, that helps the healing of the family.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Or if that person's a single gentleman for the rest of his life,
Sure.
but still that beauty of healing he can give to others, his friends, neighbors, whoever God leads him to open up and say, I know a good place.
Right.
I know a place. And I like the beauty of, I was listening intently to what you were saying, but I have little flashes, little Rolodex memories.
Okay.
we always started out with a beautiful prayer. My Stephen Minister had unique prayers or something that was it just seemed like right on the mark of what I needed to hear that morning before we cried it down and brought God right into the center. So yeah, it was very personal for me. So I'm thankful.
Rita, it sounds like you just found this at the right point in your life to help you, and it was a real grace-filled journey for you in that. And I think that speaks to what I mentioned before about this self-healing ability that we have, that our souls have, not just our bodies but our souls. And when you can kind of recalibrate in a way, right? You're going to shake off the dust. You're like, oh, this is it. This is the prayer I needed today. This is the person I needed. This is what I needed to say, and this is what I needed someone to hear.
Yes.
Right? For those words to be heard is by another human is very important sometimes. And we could probably even go into the sacrament of reconciliation and how that is an important dynamic of that. But just to keep it here in this conversation, it speaks to that human dynamic too, that social dynamic that I think is important to mention. Probably has been lacking for so many people during this time of COVID and isolation and people being disconnected from their normal circles.
Difficult.
Sure. Go into this a bit, Hans, please.
Yeah, COVID, because typically the Stephen Minister will meet with the care receiver
in person.
Typically once a week for about an hour, no more than an hour.
Okay.
During COVID, that has become very difficult. We discourage email because it's not confidential necessarily. But the fallbacks are Zoom and telephone conversations. Although at the moment, some care receivers are coached, if you will, into face-to-face meetings again, distance. Typically, most of our care receivers meet with the Stephen Minister here at the Abbey. We have small conference rooms, and at the moment, people still meet outside on beautiful days like today. But so it's not always at the home. I would say most of the time it's not at the home of the care receiver because family may interfere and guests and God knows what. So we try to find a place that's private between the two of them and let it go at that.
Okay.
But it is more difficult at the moment, certainly.
Right. And perhaps even more needed too.
What?
Even more needed at the moment too.
And more needed, yes. I know that some of our care receivers miss their face-to-face contact. And, you can't always, it may not be safe.
Right.
In some situations, and they can't all travel easily. Some of our older people.
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces to hold together in those sorts of dynamics right now, where you had that necessity of physical presence to each other, right? Or this time that we've been working through now has been having its obvious effects on that.
The one thing I did want to mention, just in case, because people are listening, I have a phone number that they can call.
Great. Yeah, we'll put it up on the bottom of the screen so they can have all that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's if you're interested in Stephen ministry, either to become a Stephen minister or a care receiver, give us a call. And the number here at the Abbey is 610-647. Oh, I gotta read this. 2530, and it's extension 1370. And just leave a message with your name and where you can be reached. And one of the Stephen ministers, or actually a Stephen leader, will call you back. And if you're interested, we'll set up an appointment. We'll explain everything to you. And then that allows us to decide whether Stephen ministry is appropriate for you and who we might best ask to be your caregiver. Okay, because, you try to match people who might, certainly don't can't stand each other. You don't put those two together.
Sure.
But so we try to match. Sometimes it's a matter of experience.
Right.
I've dealt with this kind of problem. Sometimes it is, hey, this is the kind of for me. Maybe he can talk to a younger person or not. There's all kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to pick somebody that's available to minister, and then the caregiver will contact the care receiver, and they take it from there.
Okay.
That's how the process typically works.
Very good, very good. And for someone who might be interested in becoming a Stephen minister or just inquiring into that ministry, where might they?
It's the same procedure. We interview, but I will say right now, training is typically every other year. We've just finished one course.
Okay.
So Stephen Minister, new training. Now, if somebody is really in a rush, we might find a parish that is having training. There was about 6 or 7 in the area, different Stephen organizations, Stephen ministry organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have a training class, sometimes they will let somebody else in. Training is usually not much more than a dozen people at a time.
Okay.
Sometimes as little as 2 or 3. But it's a 50-hour training session. It's quite intense.
Okay.
So that's Stephen Ministry works. If you were interested in becoming a Stephen Minister, call the same number.
Okay. Very good. And again, we'll put that number at the bottom of the screen here to provide everyone with that resource that we have it. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yes, there's
Please.
one more thing.
Sure.
Every time I heard the word telephone, it was another reminder that in between my time meeting my Stephen ministry for those months,
Mm-hmm.
I would also get a call from her to say, "Hi, Rita, good morning. I just wanted to call up and say hello." And I'm such an early riser. I'm at 8 o'clock. She would give me a buzz just to say, "Hi, Rita. I just wanted to say hello. How are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
See you in 2 weeks." So that was so important for me. I live alone, so it just was another word of encouragement, just to hear her voice, So God worked so much to help me heal. And yes, so thank you for letting me be a part of this.
I think what you're
ministry.
pointing out, Rita, is precisely what Stephen Ministry is all about. It is relationship between people.
Mm-hmm.
And, nobody wants to hurt
Mm-hmm.
by himself.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it amounts to.
Mm-hmm.
And that motto of Ken Hall, no person should suffer alone
Mm-hmm.
or hurt alone, is really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Stephen was so important. He was part of the deacon's job, if you will, to help me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the early church, that's what they were called to do, to watch out for the widows and the orphans. And
Right.
so that's all I have to say on that.
Well, it's so true. That's how it all started, right? Was a group of people coming together, knowing that they were called by someone more to,
Sacred.
to make that reality on earth, right? And there are probably more people than you know in your congregation. You go to Mass on Sunday, look around, there are probably more people out there who are willing to listen to you, who are looking to listen to you. They're ready for that, they're trained, they're prepared for it, because they've gone through this Stephen Minister process, and they have got that under their belt to be able to care in a way that is very necessary, but might not always be very accessible for us, right? And it's great to know that you're not just present here at Daylesford Abbey, but that Stephen ministers are present throughout the world, essentially, particularly originating here in the United States, but throughout the world now. And that in itself is a really incredible thing to know that we have that resource, right? And now I know that this is a Christian ministry, but are there factions maybe that have branched beyond Christianity and work with other world religions?
When I went to, I know that there were several Jewish communities
Okay.
you've been to it.
Yeah.
And I would say that most of the time, and I could be wrong.
Now, the name Stephen Ministry might not apply, of course, to other faiths, right? But yeah.
But I think most of them may be rooted in a Christian organization.
Okay.
But the care receivers, most are by no means all Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly, I know that for a fact. How many organizations are non-Christian that have Stephen Ministry themselves? I don't know.
Yeah, I know I put you on the spot with that question. That was just my curiosity coming in.
I know that care receivers are of all kinds of denominations.
Sure, and that speaks to the ministry itself too, as to its universality, right?
Yeah.
You know, which we're called to be for sure. So, Hans, Rita, thank you so much for being with us today on AbbeyCast. It's been a joy to talk to both of you, to hear about this very important ministry.
Thanks, Rita, especially.
Thank you. I learned a lot.
And we just thank our audience as well for watching, for listening, for supporting our ministry, whether it be through you sharing these links, sharing these videos and different pieces of content to your family and friends online, be it through your prayers or your financial support. We are really grateful, and you make this ministry of the Spring House and AbbeyCast possible. So if you are looking to make a private retreat, Daylesford Abbey is open for private retreatants, and you can call the number here, 610-601-8702, and we will get you set up with a private retreat. That's 610-601-8702. You can also call the Abbey number at extension, what is that again, Hans?
Oh, you know the number by heart.
For the Stephen Ministers?
It's extension 1370 at the Abbey.
That's extension 1370 at the Abbey at 610-647-2530 in order to get a hold of the Stephen Ministry hotline. And if it feels as if you're being called to a vocation, visit daylesford.org/vocations, or shoot an email to vocations@daylesford.org to further that conversation in terms of you're called a religious vocation. And beyond that, we're just so grateful for tuning in, for you listening, and for you supporting Spring House. So until next time, be well, God bless, we'll see you soon.
Now is the time.
Now is the time. Amen.
Amen.
Content from the Spring House is available free of charge. If you find this ministry is of service to you, we hope that you will support us in providing this content in an ongoing manner. We consider this a pay-it-forward endeavor. Not only would your donation help us to cover the expenses of producing its content, you would make it possible for us to offer it to others as well. As long as we are able, by your generosity, we will continue to produce content which we believe will serve the church. We hope that you might become a partner in this ministry. Please click the link in the description below this video to make a donation.